Two people invest for 30 years. One puts in $50 a month, the other puts in $2,000. When they finish, compounding accounts for exactly the same share of both accounts, 70.5% of each. Not roughly the same, exactly the same. I went looking for the number below which compounding stops working, the one everybody assumes exists. What I found is that it does not exist, and the reason it does not exist turns out to be far more useful than the number would have been. Because something does make compounding useless. It is not the thing in the title, and not the thing you have worried about. Here's the experiment. It takes a minute, and you will not look at this the same way afterward. I ran 5 people through 30 years at 7%. The only thing I changed was how much they put in each month. The person at $50 a month put in $18,000 of their own money and finished with about $61,000. At $500 a month, they put in $180,000 and finished with about $610,000. And the one at $2,000 a month put in $720,000 and finished with about $2.44 million. Now run the ratio. How much of each final balance was growth rather than deposits? $50 a month, $500 a month, $2,000 a month. Every one of them lands on 70.5% growth. There is no drop-off at the low end, no threshold to clear. The small saver gets the identical proportional benefit down to the decimal. And this is not a coincidence of the numbers I picked. It has to be this way for a simple reason. Compounding does not know how big your deposit is. It just applies a percentage. 7% of a small number and 7% of a large number are the same 7%. Double your deposit and you double every future dollar of growth with it. The shape of the curve never changes. Only its height does. It is worth asking where the myth came from, because it used to be true in a practical sense. For a long time, brokerages had minimums. You needed $1,000, sometimes more, to open the door. Trades cost money, so a $50 purchase lost a real chunk to commission. Funds came in whole shares. If a share cost $300, your $50 sat in cash. Every one of those barriers is gone now. Most brokerages now have no minimum, charge nothing to trade a fund, and sell fractional shares. The rule about needing a certain amount to start was real once. It stopped being real and nobody announced it. So if somebody tells you that you need a certain amount before investing is worth it, they are wrong about the mechanism. The mechanism does not have a minimum, which raises the obvious question. If the amount does not break compounding, what does? Time does. And time does it dramatically. I ran the test again, holding the contribution at $500 a month and changing only the years. After 5 years, they have put in $30,000 and have about $35,800. Growth is 16% of the account. Compounding is barely present. After 10 years, growth is 31%. After 20, it is 54%. Somewhere in there, the account crosses over. The market now contributes more than the person does. After 30 years, growth is 70%. After 40, it is 82%. Look at that last number. Invest $500 a month for 40 years, and you put in $240,000, ending with about $1.31 million. More than 4/5 of their wealth is money they never earned. That is the honest answer to the title. Investing too little does not make compounding useless. It is made useless by not giving it enough years. The variable everybody worries about is the wrong one. I'm Tom. This channel is about real personal finance. The kind that actually works for normal people, not the kind that gets you to click a thumbnail. No motivational fluff or fantasy returns. We just discuss what the math actually does over time. If that's what you want, hit subscribe. But there is something real underneath that title. It is a different problem than people think, and it does genuine damage. Here it is. Compounding is a multiplier. It is not a generator. It takes what you feed it and returns a multiple. What it cannot do is invent what you never put in. Watch what that means in practice. Somebody invests $100 a month for 40 years. They put in $48,000 of their own money. They finish with about $262,000. That is a 5.5 times multiple. Compounding performed beautifully. It did what the charts promised, over 4 decades, with no mistakes. And $262,000 is not a retirement. Nothing failed there. The math worked perfectly. A large multiple of a small number is still a small number. Patience does not fix that. Think about it like an oven. An oven is extraordinary. It turns flour and water into bread, reliably, without you watching. But an oven cannot bake bread you never put in. Put in a spoonful of dough, and you get a spoonful of bread, beautifully baked. Waiting longer does not make it a loaf. Compounding is the oven. Your contribution is the dough. Most conversations about investing are entirely about the oven. This is where the real harm lives, and I see it constantly. Somebody sets up 100 a month, watches a video about the miracle of compounding, then quietly stops thinking about it. The account becomes a reason not to worry, rather than a plan. They believe compounding is handling it. Compounding is handling its part, flawlessly, on the amount it was given. But it was given very little, and it cannot tell you that. That is what the title is really pointing at. There is a monthly amount below which you will not get where you are going. It is real, but it is not a universal number, and yours depends on one thing. How many years do you have left? Let me give you the actual table, because this is the useful part. Say your target is 500,000, which is a reasonable middle number for a lot of people. With 40 years to work with, you need about 190 a month. That is achievable for most people, and it is why starting young matters. At 30 years, it is 410 a month. 25 years takes 617. Drop to 20 years and it jumps to 960. 15 years needs 1,577. And with 10 years left, you need about $2,889 a month. Same goal, same market, same 7%. The only thing that changed across that entire table was the number of years. Look at what that table means for a 25-year-old, because it is genuinely good news. 200 a month gets them there. That is a phone bill and a streaming subscription. Time does so much of the work that the amount becomes a rounding error. Now look at the 55-year-old on the same table. Same goal, same market, same discipline. They need 1,577 a month, which for most people is not a rounding error. It is a real decision with real consequences for how they live now. Nothing about those two people is different except when they started. So your personal too small number is not a fixed figure. It slides upward every year you wait. At 25, it is a couple $100s. At 55, it is a mortgage payment. Now a real person, because the table is abstract and the situation is not. My friend Margaret is 45. She manages an office in Ohio and has about 80,000 saved. She is doing better than most people her age, and she knows it. That is part of the problem. Margaret puts $200 a month into her retirement account. Steady, automatic, never missed. She thinks of herself as an investor. Run her forward 20 years to 65. She ends with about 427,000, which sounds fine. But now look at where it came from. Her existing 80,000, if she never added another dollar, grows to about 323,000 on its own. So of her 427,000, 3/4 of it comes from money she already had at 45. 20 years of contributions, plus all the growth on them, adds about 104,000. Sit with that. 2 decades of discipline, every month, without fail. It moved her final number less than her old balance moved on its own. That is what a too small contribution looks like from the inside. It feels like investing. It is really just watching. Now here is what changes it. If Margaret moves from 200 a month to 600, she finishes with about 636,000 instead of 427,000. Moving to 1,000 a month takes her to about 844,000. Those are not exotic numbers. It is one decision about her paycheck, worth more than 400,000 to her. And notice what did the heavy lifting there. It was not a better fund or better timing or a cleverer strategy. It was the amount. Now the question this raises, which is the one that matters in your 40s and 50s. If you are behind, which is worth more? Putting in more money or getting more years? I ran both for Margaret. Her baseline is $400 a month for 20 years, which lands at about $531,000. Doubling her contribution to $800 a month gets her to about $740,000. That is $208,000 more. Working 5 extra years instead, at the original $400 a month, gets her to about $782,000, or $251,000 more. So at 20 years out, buying more time still slightly beats doubling the money. Time is that powerful, even this late. But here's the honest version, and it is the one I would actually tell her. She does not have to choose. Doing both, $800 a month for 25 years, puts her at about $1.1 million. And there is a cost to thinking about it for a while. If Margaret raises her contribution today, she gets to $740,000. If she stays at $400 for 5 more years and then raises it, she gets to about $658,000. 5 years of intending to fix it costs about $82,000. That result surprised me enough that I ran it across every age, and the pattern is consistent. At 30, doubling your contribution wins. At 35, doubling still wins, barely. From 40 onward, adding years wins at every single age I tested, and the gap gets wider the older you are. At 55, doubling the money adds about $540,000 by the finish line. Working 5 more years instead lands closer to $697,000. There is a reason for that, and it is not mysterious. Doubling your contribution only affects the new money. Adding 5 years affects the entire balance, including everything you already have, plus 5 more years of contributions on top. But now the honest part, which the math cannot tell you. Those extra years are not free. You pay for them with the healthiest years you have left, and those are the only ones you can never buy back. Doubling your contribution is paid for out of your lifestyle today. Adding years is paid for out of your life. So the math says time is the stronger lever. It does not say time is the cheaper one. When someone tells you to just work longer, they are giving you correct arithmetic and incomplete advice. Now let me be very clear about something, because this video could easily be taken the wrong way. Nothing here is an argument for not investing a small amount. If $50 a month is what you have, invest the $50 a month. It compounds at exactly the same rate as everybody else's money. It builds the habit that makes the bigger contributions possible later. And if there is an employer match attached to it, take every cent. That money is the best return available to any human being anywhere. And I want to be specific about the match. It is the one thing on this channel I will tell you to do without any qualification. Take somebody earning $60,000 with a common arrangement, where the employer adds 50 cents for every dollar on the first 6%. That worker puts in $300 a month. The employer adds $150. That $150 is a 50% return before the market has done anything at all. There is no investment on earth that reliably offers that. Over 30 years, the employer's portion by itself grows to about $183,000. Not the whole account, just the free part. If money is tight and you can only do one thing, do that one. The point is not that small amounts are worthless. The point is that small amounts plus time are not automatically a plan, and a lot of people have quietly decided they are. There is one more honest limit. Everything here used 7%, which is roughly the long-run average of the American stock market after inflation. It is not a promise. Your real path will be lumpier than these clean numbers, and the decade you retire into matters more than any of us would like. If you just looked at the table and found a gap, the obvious question is where the extra money comes from. Let me be practical about that, because the usual answer is useless. The usual answer is to cut small recurring pleasures. Skip the coffee, cancel a subscription. That advice is popular because it is easy to say. It rarely closes a gap of hundreds a month. The money is almost never in the small stuff. It is in the fixed costs, and there are only about 5 of them: housing, vehicles, insurance, debt payments, and whatever you are paying to support other adults. Those are painful to look at, which is why they go unexamined for years. One of them moving is worth more than a decade of skipped lattes. Refinancing something, or driving a car 2 more years instead of replacing it, or shopping your insurance around. Each of those can free up more per month than every small cut combined. And there is one more source that costs you nothing today. Every raise between now and retirement is money you are not currently living on. Decide where it goes before it arrives, because after it arrives, it will already be spent. So here's what I would actually do this week, and it takes about 10 minutes. Work out the number of years between today and the year you want your money to start working for you. Then, find your row in that table. 40 years is $190 a month for a $500,000 goal. 20 years is $960. Adjust the target up or down to match your own life. Then, compare that number to what you are actually putting in right now, and be honest about the target while you are at it. 500,000 is the number I used, but it is not a law. If your house is paid off and your Social Security will be solid, your real number may be lower. If you are renting in an expensive city, it is higher. Take your expected annual spending, subtract what Social Security will cover, and multiply what is left by about 25. That is your actual target. And it is usually less frightening than the round number in your head. If the gap is small, you are fine, and you can stop reading articles about compounding and go do something enjoyable. If the gap is large, you have learned something specific and fixable, which is much better than a vague worry. And you have learned it while you still have years to use. And I want to leave you with the reframe, because it changes what you pay attention to. For years, you have probably been told that the market is the important part. Which fund, which allocation, whether now is a good time to buy. Those questions are not worthless, but they are arguing about the oven. The number you actually control, the one that decides almost everything, is sitting on a single line of your payroll form. It is the least glamorous number in personal finance, and it outranks all the others. One last thing. For anyone who ran their number and found a gap they cannot close, the contribution is not your only lever. It is just the one this video is about. If you cannot get there on the amount, you can lower what retirement has to cost. You can also buy years by working part-time instead of not at all. Delaying Social Security raises your floor for life, which lowers what the portfolio has to carry. A gap you cannot close with one lever is often closable with 3. What you cannot do is close it by hoping compounding will make up the difference on its own. Because the cruel part of all this is that compounding never tells you when your contribution is too small. It just quietly delivers a perfect multiple of a number that was never going to be enough and hands it to you at 65. Tell me in the comments what your year's number is and what you are putting in each month. And tell me whether the table said what you expected. I read every comment and I reply to as many as I can. And if you want the next video, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.